That's not Danielle here with the Oak and Lilly study group, the study group for issues pertaining to young witches and pagans. And this week we are going to talk about discrimination. If you've been a member of any alternative faith, you've likely experienced some discrimination at some point. And before I get into some big mainstream media examples, I'd love to hear first from our student or from anyone else on the internet what you have experienced as far as discrimination goes.
Well, you know, we last week I believe we talked about our personal stories, and now I had a little bit about personal discrimination in there. What was kind of interesting is that my friend James actually faced a little bit of discrimination recently. He is up in New York, and to my understanding, because of his pagan belief, there's not a lot of people that want to associate with it. That's what I've heard. So within his campus, there was just a lot of discrimination and understanding. I won't tell the name of the school, but yeah, no, where he is, he's a very open pagan. I don't believe he calls himself a witch, but regardless, he is a pagan. And he is just not well received, which is a shame because he's a wonderful human being.
Mm-hmm.
The new satellite.
And I'm surprised, actually, in a state like New York, that there's a lack of acceptance to pagans, especially in a fairly rural area. Harking back to the old definition pagan of the countryside, but you know, I digress. Also, my friend Kelly, as a matter of fact, lost a relationship due to the fact that she was a pagan. It happened once before. So lots of simple discriminations, but discriminations nonetheless.
I personally faced some discrimination when I was in high school in Boston, very cosmopolitan city. I think would be very open. Even there you can find discrimination, and I'm sure a lot of kids in high schools have had this problem where people knew me. My parents kept trying to cover it up as I was Jewish, but I had one teacher say in a class about religions of the world. They had a brief discussion on paganism, and they said, oh, well, no one believes in those gods anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a moment where I wanted to go to the teacher and say, well, this is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say, but you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That I held back based on some other experiences I'd already had in school. Teachers kicking tarot decks out of the way because they didn't like them, and they didn't like that we were using them, not even to play Go Fish.
Mm-hmm.
Which you can do with the tarot deck. Just take out the major arcana and you got a playing card deck. It's a lot of fun. But also, there was one student in particular who liked to call us devil worshippers.
Oh no. Oh, yep.
And one of those cases. And we tried to do the responsible thing. The best thing you can try to do in situations like this is get good information sources and teach and leave the door open for people to ask questions. Explain, no, there is no place for a devil figure or a Satan figure in our mythology. We do not personally believe in him. Therefore, we cannot be devil worshippers if we do not believe in a devil. Mm-hmm. And so on. But
because it's quite contrary from the horned god, you know, mm-hmm. Baphomet. I mean, he's been unfortunately associated with the devil, mm-hmm. But I don't think it's true. So
yes. But I think some of the misassociation with the horned god and the devil comes from that attempt to demonize the old faiths. and also possibly a bit of confusion based on some of the stuff Crowley was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Crowley was a very interesting figure, to say the least.
Yeah.
But
I respect Crowley personally, but yeah.
But there comes a point that I learned where you can offer advice and leave the door open and teach as much as you can, but people put up a wall and they won't hear it and they won't respect it. And all you really can do is say, thank you, I respect your beliefs. If you're not going to respect mine, then we shall simply not discuss this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And if they keep harassing you, that's where I found one of the major problems is the harassment. Part of the discrimination where you say thank you but no thank you. And in some cases, I've learned to smile and nod. People who preach to you when they don't intend to. People who don't realize that they're preaching to you and that you are not of their faith. Who just automatically assume it's much easier to just smile and nod rather than get into that confrontation. Because the confrontation can draw things out and close a lot of doors. I've learned to keep my beliefs silent in certain situations. My best friend, we talk about it very much. I don't talk about it when her family's around. I don't mention anything. When I went down to visit her, I said a very true statement that I've been raised Jewish, which was true. I did not say I was Wiccan. And when she started talking about Jesus, I just politely smiled and nodded and thanked her for her sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, it's not inappropriate to, if you're discussing beliefs, to use, if you want to stay away from some sort of a heated discussion, if you are Wiccan or pagan, and say, this is what I was raised. Unless, of course, you were raised pagan, then you can either confront it head on or avoid it completely. But I mean, I agree. It's not completely irresponsible to say I was raised Jewish. In my case, I would say I was raised Protestant.
Yeah.
And that avoids that back and forth. If you don't want that back and forth.
I know some people, especially young people, like to get into that head-on confrontation. They want to take down and knock down all the barriers. And
I agree with that sentiment, actually. The want to knock down the barriers.
But there's a time, as they say in poker, you gotta know when to hold them and when to fold them.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a time.
When to bluff and when to bet.
Yeah. There is a time to go head forward and knock down people's expectations and assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's knowing when those times are that's very difficult. And when to say thank you but no thank you, and thank them for their beliefs.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's not just in high schools, and it's not just something you're going to have to confront in the school system.
Before you go ahead, I just have a quick question in regard. Like most of your discrimination came from high school, right?
High school and teachers and whatnot.
Then, would you consider yourself in high school, not to put a label on it, but would you consider yourself one of the smarter people, one of the more academic students there?
I was at a school that was mainly known for its academics,
Mm-hmm.
so we didn't really have a lot of sports stuff. Our big thing was the soccer and lacrosse groups.
Okay.
Which tells you a lot about us.
Well, the idea that I'm trying to convey is that, particularly from my high school, you did have the people that were considered quote-unquote academics, of which, whether this sounds arrogant or not, I was considered part of. And some of my peers were indeed pagan or Wiccan. And when people discovered that, they'd be like, "Ooh, that there's that stigma there of they're a witch. Stay away from them."
I was fortunate enough to be a part of the theater group, which was where all of my school's Wiccans and pagans were.
But through that, then would you say let's replace academic then with the theater group in your case? Because in my understanding, I've heard we've all heard the term. Hopefully, we've all heard the term of the craft of the wise. would you agree then say academics in certain high school settings are looked upon, academic people are looked upon as, oh, we have to make fun of them. Would you agree?
In some cases, but you'll find that in any high school
But
for any reason though.
But my theory is, are they parallel? Because I meet a lot more academic people within my experiences of the craft. So I tend to wonder, is it parallel? Are the smarter amongst us? Not to put down any other religion. That's not my goal here.
Discrimination goes both ways.
Yeah,
I'm going to point that out.
I really don't. I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't genius Christians out there, or genius atheists, or genius Jewish people, or what have you. But in my experience, I tend to notice that the quote-unquote smarter amongst us, the more creative amongst us, tend to be drawn towards a spiritualist path. I wonder if there's a correlation in your opinion.
Potentially there is a correlation. I think it's mostly because people who are more academic are more likely to look at a broader worldview and to look in other directions and to study in other directions, or to be open-minded to these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that these are the only people who you're going to find upon the path.
Oh, no.
But I can see where there could be a correlation there.
Yeah, again, I'd like to point out the caveat there that I'm not saying that there are unintelligent people in other religions, because certainly there are. There's been proof of that, and I respect every other religion out there. But just curious about that particular theory. Yeah.
I have here, of course, one of the most famous incidents of discrimination in recent months was a TSA whistleblower. Someone had been pointing out practices in the TSA at her airport that were unsafe and had been trying to improve situations, was fired. Mostly due to conflicts between her and another employee over her faith.
Really?
She was a witch.
Mm.
She was a Wiccan, and she called herself a witch. She was reclaiming the word as a wise woman. She had...
So this is a TSA employee, you're saying?
Yes, it was. She had been accused of following an employee on the highway one snowy evening after work and casting a spell on the heat of her car, causing it to not work.
Oh dear.
Things like that.
That's kind of silly. So, what I find interesting about this, this is a TSA employee. Would you agree then that a TSA, being a security agency, is therefore related to the government?
Yes, it is a government position.
Is it a government?
I really don't know. Government position.
So through that, my question becomes, what about the question of the separation of church and state?
That's another issue. That's a very pointed issue. This was pointing out other moments of discrimination. She had been told to sit down with this lady and explain her religion to her, and she felt that was not her place.
Mm-hmm.
She said, if I was Jewish, would you ask me to do these things as well?
Mm-hmm.
Because
faith should be a private thing. I mean, and you have the option to make it public or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see where that would be a horrible thing to make someone do.
I can also see where it can be an opportunity to explain it to that woman. I wouldn't necessarily force her to explain it, but give her the opportunity to say, she doesn't, it looks like she really doesn't understand your belief systems. Would you like to sit down and explain it to her in a safe environment?
I agree with that as well.
I can agree with that. That would be our Fox over there, adding her voice to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, if it was presented as, we're going to give you the opportunity, if you'd like to take it, to explain your religious belief to this person.
Yes.
Then if I was that woman, I would say, certainly, yes, I would love to if she would be receptive. However, instead of saying that, they went out, to my understanding, and said,
yes,
we'd like you. We'd like you to explain your religion to this person. You know, that sounds
yes.
more.
If you're having it was sort of you're having issues with this person, explain your religion to them.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. You know, it's like, well,
That
why
is
should I? They're not going to be receptive. You know,
Yes.
it seems like they're going to be forced to listen, so that they're not going to respect it at all.
This certainly isn't the only case of discrimination which has come to media attention. That was from MSNBC. You can look it up. The whistleblowing witch fired. The other article I have is from About.com. I went to major media sites, not specifically pagan-oriented sites, so you can certainly find on things like Witchbox or The Wild Hunt examples of discrimination.
Or the Daily Spell.
Or the Daily Spell.
I wish I was
You
aware
can
of
join
all these
us.
websites. Yeah.
There was actually a case here in the 90s, here in Salem, Massachusetts, of public discrimination and considering Wicca not a real religion. It was when Republican Governor Paul Cellucci was doing his election ads. He was attacking Attorney General Scott Harshberger for his 1992 role in assisting Salem police when Christian evangelists were protesting against were accused of accosting the city's Wiccan community, which if you have ever visited Salem in October, you know that there will occasionally be issues between evangelists and the local Wiccan community.
I witnessed some this year, actually. Yeah.
Um,
Bordering on violent. Yeah.
Yes. Harshberger threatened to prosecute on civil rights charges, civil rights violations. Cellucci's commercials featured a police lineup of Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and a pointy-hatted, wart-nosed, stereotypical witch. An announcer called it scary that Harshberger might threaten prosecution on behalf of witches as the witch standing there cackles. Wiccans in the area were notably upset.
Yeah, that's offensive, in my
Because
opinion.
they were using the old stereotype of the Wicked Witch of the West. And they point out in this article, if this had been Jews or blacks, people might be equally offended if he had used a stereotype of, say, a black-faced person. Or the old crook-nosed Jew with his money bag, the miser.
And of course, you know, the curls.
And the curls.
I mean, no, I would have found that if I was, you know, not very young at the time. That very, very offensive. I mean, let's look at, for instance, what one of the, there's an advertisement of one of the witches' balls in Salem. I believe it might have been the famed Cabot witches' ball, where it says right there, you know, they don't allow costumes with green-faced witches. Why? Because it's offensive. I mean, that...
I can understand that very much. So.
But not only that, but that commercial is saying that they're fictional.
Indeed.
By putting them with other fictional characters.
Yes.
That's not only demeaning the religion, but showing that it has the same value as the Easter Bunny.
Yes.
And Easter is a pagan holiday.
We'll get into that. That's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But they also point out in this article, the author wrote, just recently here, I reported here that a Wiccan woman was finally, after some struggle, permitted to perform wedding ceremonies in the state of Virginia. It seems that the first judge she went to decided that Wicca wasn't really a religion. It goes on to say, it is perhaps the most devastating form of religious discrimination and disdain to tell someone that their religion doesn't even count as a religion in this society.
Yeah, that's a huge civil rights issue. That's why I'm happy to see currently that there have been a number of organizations that have been considered something called a 501c3 organization, meaning that they are a not-for-profit religious organization. And some pagan groups and Wiccan groups have received that classification. That makes me happy. You know,
and it makes me happy as well.
That shouts progress to me.
I also remember the incident. Young Patrick Stewart, who was a wicked soldier killed overseas defending our country, wasn't allowed to have the pentacle on his tombstone.
Yeah, yeah.
The famous pentacle quest, which was brought up.
Some people would say infamous.
Some people would say infamous.
And that there lies discrimination.
You have Selena Fox in the Circle Sanctuary, who I'm very grateful for, standing up for the rights of our military veterans.
Lots of respect there.
Much respect. And gaining that right for all Wiccan veterans. So that would be one of those times to stand up and fight. So it's not just in the high schools or the boardrooms, it's everywhere.
It is, yeah, certainly.
They have another story about a Wiccan who had been forced out of her town when her daughter received heavy abuse at the hands of the school authorities. They don't say what kind of abuse, probably verbal abuse, because Mummy was a witch.
Abuse is abuse, though.
Abuse is abuse. She would receive threats. Her children couldn't play at a park nearby. Clerks would even close down their registers at the supermarket when she'd come over, just because she was a witch and she challenged the fact that Republic Missouri happens to use the Christian fish symbol on its state flags, and she challenged that on terms of separation of church and state.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You shouldn't use a religious symbol on government property.
We should also say at this point, I believe that it's appropriate to say that just as one would protest having a Christian symbol on a state flag or what have you, it's also appropriate to protest a Wiccan symbol on a state flag.
Exactly. I have nothing personally against Christianity. It's just they happen to be the majority, so that's where the majority of issues tend to crop up.
Oh, I respect the Christian religion for what it is. We also have to take, I mean, we can both say that we're both, not to, put out any spots there,
That's
but we're both Corellian. Or like, I'm training and you are already.
First degree priestess.
Yeah, so it's fine to say the Corellian idea of the diamond, deity, many faces, its diamond has many facets, all religion in its own right
is
beautiful.
Beautiful and sacred. Which means this also extends not only to discrimination against Wiccan, but Wiccans discriminating against other faiths, which is something else I have seen. I've seen people bashing Christianity in chat rooms I've been in. And I try to beat down on that because that's not really living the read. And it harm none, do what you will. Or do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will, as Crowley put it.
I had one magical teacher that insisted that if you were to become a true Wiccan, true member of the craft of the wise, that you had to respect everyone else's beliefs, regardless of whether you agree with it or not, because it's appropriate in this society, and this society should preach the idea, or teach the idea rather, that agreeing to disagree is a good thing.
Yes,
so,
and I completely agree with that statement, and the fact that we should be tolerant of other faiths, even when they are not tolerant of us. Be the example you wish to set in the world.
And it can be difficult.
It can be very difficult.
I like to cite this as a very extreme example, but you have such groups as the Westboro Baptist Church. Okay, if you don't know who they are, I'm not going to say look them up because unfortunately they're quite difficult to look at. But the Westboro Baptist Church, in their hate mongering, they're exercising politically their freedom of speech. And if we were to limit them, we will be limiting ourselves. So that brings me to the point of, I might not agree with what you're saying, with what you're saying, but I will fight for your right to say it.
And that gets into counter-protesting.
Yeah.
Which I believe in peaceful counter-protesting against things such as the hate-mongering of the Westboro Baptist Church. You don't have to, if you come across this discrimination, you can always be polite and walk away. And there are also peaceful, non-violent ways to protest against it. I've seen many of them at some of the conventions I've gone to, where people joking and good-naturedly mock their signs with I'm trying to remember some of them. God hates mutants.
Yeah, God hates mutants.
And at sci-fi conventions and such.
Yeah, where they would have the signs like, for instance, so and so is in hell, or God hates expletive.
Yes.
They would, I've seen one where it says God hates this man, pointing, to the. But I also, when you bring up counter-protest for such things, for instance, let's talk about this year. I was walking down Essex Street during the Halloween season, down in Salem. Essex Street, big pedestrian mall. Lots of people flock there during Halloween, in case you're unaware. And there were a couple of fundamentalist preachers out there. And I'm sure you encountered them yourself. One of them was hitched himself to a light pole, and he was reading off of something, and people were this close to his face, screaming at him. It was only making him fight back longer, and that could have, thank the gods it didn't, but it could have escalated into something extremely violent. I did not want to see, I don't agree with what the fundamentalist was saying, but I don't want to see his face smashed in, and nor do I want to see these people that were confronting him injured in any way, and I don't want to see either of them arrested, love and light. You don't want to see anybody get hurt in that situation. So, based upon events such as that, I believe that the best sort of counter-protest is no counter-protest at all. Because if you're counter-protesting them, you're giving them something to feed off of. And if you ignore them, the worst thing for a person to be, in my opinion, is ignored. Because
they're
not.
Make a good point.
You don't have that back and forth. The best counter-protest I've ever heard of, it wasn't any counter-protest at all, per se, but again with the Westboro Baptist Church, and I believe it was somewhere in Wyoming, a group of bikers parked their bikes in front of them and just started revving their engines. I mean, that wasn't technically a counter-protest, but you sure as heck couldn't hear the Westboro Baptist Church. So,
yes. I've seen interesting counter-protests to them. One was a dance circle. Where, if you don't know Judaism, they were protesting against this Jewish school, and all the students, Jewish or not, got together and did the horror, which is a type of circle dance. And they just danced. And that was their counter-protest.
But anyway, back to more of the pagan side of discrimination.
Yes. I have another example here. In a story from July of 2003 in Kentucky, the state's Commission on Human Rights has helped a store reach a settlement with 3 women over claims of discrimination. The women each received a cash settlement, while the store Trendy Gifts is allowed to avoid any avoid admitting any wrongdoing. Did they do anything wrong? The owner of the store was quoted as saying, "There was an incident that occurred between my employees and members of the Wiccan cult. These members of this so-called religion, Wicca, filed a discrimination suit against Trendy Gifts with Kentucky Human Rights Commission. We denied any human rights violations. We came to an agreement and settled the case without any admission of guilt."
I love that phrase, so-called religion, right? Because technically in the eyes of the federal government can't say psychism exists. The federal government can't say, true magic exists, okay, just because of how it's set up. They're not, it would allow spectral evidence, which I agree should not be in context of true law. But barring that, they do agree. I believe it is true. I mean, if pagan organizations are able to be called a 501c organization, that means they are recognized as a true religion. It is not a so-called religion.
Yes.
In the eyes of the government now, it is a religion.
Yes.
Okay, and it should be viewed upon as that. There are some groups that don't have what 501c status, but it doesn't mean they can't achieve it.
Yes.
So if you are Wiccan, darn it, you are part of a real religion.
Yes.
You know.
They even have a discussion on that and how to deal with Wiccans in the military in their little military handbook. Though currently there are no Wiccan clergy within the military.
That's
It's
changing,
something that is being strived for, and I support whoever is going for clergy status within Wiccan clergy status. Do we have any comments or anything from the chat room of interest?
Nope. I just wanted to say that just because it's considered an official religion by the government doesn't mean that people take it seriously. I mean, Jedi is considered an official religion in a couple of countries. One of those countries is Canada.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, you can be a legit Jedi in Canada and in England.
Where do I sign up?
It's actually, I've done some study on this, and it's actually pretty interesting. It's actually a pretty interesting religious group to work with.
I wanted to. I mean,
studies.
Do you agree with that? I mean, do you think that's okay? That Jedi is a religion?
Well, to be fair, Jedi is based off of Shaolin monks.
Yeah.
I do believe.
Is that technically a form of Buddhism?
Shaolin, the Shaolin monasteries.
Yeah.
It's based off of Buddhism, but it takes, and you can see the similarities in the modern Jedi religion with Buddhism. It tends to strive more towards right living with the Force, and whatever side of the Force that you fall on.
I know it might be a little. People might think of it a little silly, but I know you're basing it off of the people. Our Jedis are basing it off of the films, and they're basing it off of some of the sci-fi books that came afterwards, but it is a legitimate philosophy, especially if it's based off of Shaolin beliefs. I mean,
the monks and the monasteries.
It might be silly, but it's not. I hope people aren't offended by me calling it silly, but I can see how that would effectively be a religion, or at least a philosophy.
Yes.
And
they do have a teacher and guiding systems. I studied it a while back before I came to the Corellian tradition.
Yeah, allow me to anger about tens of thousands of people. What about Scientology? That's technically based on sci-fi novels. L. Ron Hubbard. I mean... Yes.
As much as I do not personally agree with some of their structuring, I don't know about the beliefs, but the structuring but I respect their position as a religious organization.
Yeah, the organization of Scientology, my understanding, is immense at this point. Regardless of what you feel about them, they're there and they're pushing their ideals, and heck, they should be considered a legal religion. So based upon that, I know a lot of people might be hesitant to say, what's with Scientology? To me, that just sounds like ology, meaning study of. So it's the study of science, which is the study of everything else. That's kind of foolish vernacular. But it's a legal religion. They have 501c organizations. So based upon that, why can't we? The same thing.
And we're working on that. We're pushing towards that. A lot of it has to do with how this country was founded. Admittedly, even though we have the clauses of separation of church and state, this is still a very Christian majority nation. Yeah, well, with the founding fathers, especially, you have Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, all of them. I mean, Jefferson preached the idea of having open-mindedness, a cultural exchange. As far as Ben Franklin as well. I mean, they said that they were all Christians, and believe me,
Again, I respect the Christian religion.
Have you ever read the Jefferson Bible?
No, I have not.
He wrote a Bible.
He didn't write a Bible per se. What he basically did is he went through the, I believe it was the King James, and cut out everything that Jesus himself actually said, and then threw everything else away.
That is beautiful.
And so the Jefferson Bible is just exact quotes from Jesus.
Yeah, well,
And that's it.
You know, it's funny though. I mean, in Wicca, I believe there are things you can pick and choose. There are so many different traditions, you know, and even with Protestantism, there are so many different denominations, you know. There are denominations in Wicca. There are denominations within Buddhism. Shaolin is, you know, not everybody is a Shaolin monk. You know, they're Buddhists. Not everybody is.
The Zen Buddhist.
You got the Zen Buddhist. Yeah.
Zen Buddhism is a very interesting branch of Buddhism. You have Tibetan Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, and they're very different, separate things.
And also you have, I mean, Jewish people, Orthodox, Reformed,
conservative, ultra-conservative, Hasidim.
Did they
You've got the Kabbalistics as well, which are a branch. They're their own little thing.
But to bring it back to witchcraft a little bit, Kabbalic witchcraft.
Yes.
At one point, I mean, technically through the belief structure, if you were to participate in Kabbalic witchcraft, you had to be a man, and women were not allowed to learn about it. But still, Kabbalic, let's change the vernacular, Kabbalic magic existed.
Yes.
Plain and simple. Okay? Yeah. Christian spiritualists. The spiritualist movement was huge. Spiritualist churches still exist. They're few and far between.
Yes.
But they still exist. I mean, Arthur Conan Doyle, who for the longest time of his life was bouncing between agnostic and Christian, and then he finally became a spiritualist. I mean, every bit of religion, I believe, has their magic in it. Prayer. People are going to be very angry with me, I'm sure, but prayer can be equated to magic.
I can understand that.
The intent. Communing with a deity. Magic. Yes. You just happen to call it prayer, I happen to call it magic. It's, in essence, I believe, the same general thing. And please, argue with me. Yeah. You know, I encourage it. You know?
Yes. Starting to wrap things up.
Yeah.
How have you found is the best way that you found to deal with discrimination?
Okay.
Within the craft or against the craft?
Okay. Within the craft, I notice some traditions don't necessarily get along. That, I believe, is an appropriate point to agree to disagree, bar none. Maybe have a friendly debate if having a friendly, I'm going to stress that, friendly debate is possible, because sometimes you can't have a friendly debate. Mm-hmm. You turn into fisticuffs. So in that case, agree to disagree, walk away. Out of the tradition, out of the craft, the same thing is applicable. However, I believe it is also possible to, if somebody is they have to be receptive. If somebody is going to be receptive, going to respect your views, and I believe it also should be an exchange in which you should be able to discuss your views on religion and the craft. For instance, I was having a conversation with a Hasidic a few months ago about how I was a member of the craft. And we discussed back and forth. And I was able to sit there and listen to his views. And we had an exchange. He was receptive, I was receptive. You see, but if I was not receptive to his ascetic views, to his very conservative views, we wouldn't have had that conversation because it would not have been fair. And there are also people that just refuse to listen, and if you refuse to listen, well, frankly, they're not worth your time. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel.
Probably one of the best summations. Mm-hmm. Within the craft, again, friendly discussion or agree to disagree. Outside of the craft, equivalent exchange, to borrow a term from an anime that I adore, Full Metal Alchemist. Again, about alchemy and the study of magic. But you have to give and take in equal terms. Really, that is very important. and talking to people who are receptive. If you can sense that they are not receptive, do not push the issue.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because that turns you into a wicked evangelist.
Yeah, I mean, nobody likes someone who's going to go out and proselytize. I believe is the correct word. To go out and purposely attempt to convert people.
Yes.
If they're going to be receptive, then by all means, try and convert them. I mean,
at least express your beliefs. I don't believe in forcibly in trying to convert people. It's more expressing your beliefs, and if they are willing, if this is something that they have been seeking,
yes,
or something that has sought them,
yeah,
and matches with them, they'll come of their own volition.
Well, that's what I mean. I suppose the phrase "trying to convert" was inappropriate.
Yes.
Not the correct term to say. But if someone's going to come up to you and they're open and say, here are my beliefs here. I mean, I don't really know about this. I've looked at this religion. I've looked at, for instance, Buddhism, and it just doesn't really fit with me. I've looked at Christianity. It doesn't really fit with me. Then it's like, well, I wonder if you would mind hearing my views out there. I wonder if you could listen to me. Maybe you'd like what I have to say. That's what I mean by trying to convert.
Yes.
It's more like offering up the opportunity to do so. And going,
yes,
if you're not interested, fine.
Yes, that's much more appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So, offering up your views to people who are receptive,
mm-hmm.
listening to what they have to say in return, and who knows, it may influence how you see the world as well.
You could learn from them.
You can learn from them. Everyone has something to teach you. So, when we reconvene next week, we are going to have a discussion on ethics within magic.
Interesting, okay.
How morality, ethics, what is immoral magic, what is unethical, and how do different groups' ethics affect how they interact with the world and with magic.
Very cool.
So, thank you for joining us this week. I will see you next week. And don't forget to join the Oak and Lily study group on Witch School or on the Young Witches. Blessings.